Good evening. Another live before lock as we get you ready for a gigantic, mega, heavyweight, epic two-game slate. That's right, Terry McBride. I don't know if you were told ahead of time, but you and I are charged with breaking down one of the most interesting, enthralling, memorable slates that we'll have in the first round, arguably in the history of the NBA's first round. And you and I have the pleasure of doing this over the next less than an hour, 55 minutes. And we may get to some other stuff if time permits. What's up, my friend?
It's just not enough time, man. It's not enough time to talk about a juicy slate like this one. I mean, you get one center to choose from on FanDuel. It's like, how do you analyze that? We got to spend like a half hour on that spot alone. We need a longer show. They got to push lock back or something. This is ridiculous. I'm doing good, man. How you doing on this rainy, nasty Sunday of ours?
Well, that's the thing. It's like wherever you may be, I think 2/3 maybe of the country is dealing with some sort of wet. Right. So it may not be cold and miserable like you and I, you in the New York area, me in the Philly area, dealing with the cold element to it. But it seems like a lot of people even in the southern regions are dealing with wet as well. So what a perfect opportunity, right? An excuse on this long Memorial Day weekend to sit home on your couch, watch basketball, but also win some money, right? That's really what this is all about. Dominate another league tournament.
I like it. You know, I didn't even realize it was Memorial Day weekend. That's how out of it I was until like last night. Somebody said it, and I was like, oh, yeah, end of May. That makes sense. Yeah, how about that? I am looking forward. June 10th, I got the second jab in my arm. I'm back in action. I can't wait.
Wait a sec. Out of it in what regard? Like you're so inundated in the NBA playoffs, or you're ripping through MLB stacks, or are you just going back and like some sort of trilogy and you're rewatching and famous trilogy? Like what were you lost in that you forgot it was Memorial Day weekend?
Well, I mean, I'm so zeroed in. My whole life is like right here in this little computer screen between baseball stats and all the DFS and basketball and doing the shows and everything. But I mean, if we're talking Memorial Day movies, there's no better Memorial Day movie than Jaws. I've seen Jaws probably more than any movie ever. And that was on the other day. I watched it start to finish the other day. If it's on today, which it probably is today or tomorrow, I guarantee I'll be watching it again. So
what constitutes a Memorial Day movie? Is it that it's about Memorial Day, or Memorial Day is like in the movie, or was it released on a Memorial Day? I mean, what constitutes that?
I'm thinking like in-universe Memorial Day, like summer movie. I guess we could call it summer movie, you know, kind of that. There's got to be some beach going in there, I think. But like Memorial Day was, it was all of Amity Island was geared up around Memorial Day. Without Memorial Day, the island doesn't survive. And you got a killer shark out there in the water. All of a sudden, they're the mayor of Shark City, and you gotta make a decision about keeping the beaches open or not. It's a big problem.
It's one of the worst political decisions in the history of movies. Absolutely.
What political decision?
Yes, in history, right? Real or fake, by all means. All right, let's jump into something here, because you bring up an interesting point again at Digital B21 for Terry, at Shander Show for me. Jordan is in the house producing the show. It's all brought to you by No House Advantage. We'll tell you all about the amazing ways in which you can take advantage at No House Advantage of player props that you're just not going to be able to get here on the book. All right, so here's the thing. Let's start. We've got the Nets and Celtics, and also we've got that Clippers and Mavericks game where revenge may be, depending on how fast that pendulum swings back. But you mentioned the center position, and why not? Normally we build up to that with the Embiids or the Jokic's of the world on the slate, but why not when it comes to, especially from a FanDuel standpoint, it's pretty much Tristan Thompson at this point, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much Tristan Thompson and only Tristan Thompson. If you add up all the other eligible centers for guys that we even are projecting any minutes tonight, it comes 10 minutes short of the minutes projection that we have on Tristan Thompson. Zubac is the second highest at 13. Then we get a 6.9 minute projection on Dwight Powell, and we've got Cousins and Boban just with a token under 1 minute apiece. So there's not a lot to work with at the center position on the FanDuel slate tonight. You could get a few additional minutes out of a guy like Powell, and maybe we're squeezing a little value there, but it is very much just coming up all Tristan Thompson all the time. I ran off the usual crunch that I've been doing for these shows where we're just playing with the optimal lineups. In the first 500 optimal lineups on FanDuel, it came up 95% Tristan Thompson, 476 out of 500. Across sites, that's 80% on DK because you get to use Claxton in the center spot on DraftKings, so he's soaking up a little bit of that. And then you get Willie Cauley-Stein, who could pick up a little bit of value in that spot as well. So it's just a mess on both sides, but particularly on FanDuel. If you're not playing Tristan Thompson in that spot on FanDuel, you're probably just not playing. You're probably just sitting the slate out because I don't really see another viable option.
Zubac is the only other guy that we have on our ownership projections for the night slate, Terry, on Awesemo.com. And again, fantastic application of the Awesemo Plus tools that you have at your expense. Everybody, of course, $29.95. You don't need to be an insider. You don't need to be some sort of track record here where you have to win a certain amount. You just join the Awesemo Plus community and you get access to everything NBA related. And just looking at that, Zubac really the only other guy, and the ownership difference in ownership is nearly 60%, to your point, where 75% owned is Thompson and down at the 18%, maybe 19% when it's done. It sounds like you're not even thinking about, at least from a FanDuel perspective, a pivot off of Thompson, even though pretty much everybody's running him, right?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of, we have to consider that this is not even a roster spot tonight, and just plug Tristan Thompson in and just don't even worry about it. Because if you're going off of him and going to Zubac, the next best option, yeah, you're paying only $4,100 for him, but he's projected for 13 minutes tonight in our numbers. I mean, there's just nothing to work with there. So yeah, he could go over that, of course, but he's averaged 17.4 minutes across the course of the playoffs so far. So, what is our real upside there? I don't think they're going to need him in this spot. So it's just dicey. You can do it in a few shares. Like, you don't have to lock and load Tristan Thompson in 100% if you don't want to. If you want to carve out 10% and throw it Zubac's way, it's fine. But most likely you're just putting in dead lineups if you're doing that. It's so much more likely that we're going to get Tristan Thompson filling that role than anyone else on the FanDuel slate where he's the singular center, that it just makes sense.
Yeah, this is amazing. I don't know if definitely not often, right? We get the super chat up and running here, as well as the premium Slack. So if you have any questions, maybe there's a deeper dive you would like for us to look specifically, of course, Terry, to look at that 5 spot, but it doesn't really look like much on top of that. But I mean, think about how much everybody right now collectively has. 75% projected ownership for Tristan Thompson at the 5 spot. Think about how much pressure is on Tristan Thompson to come out there and perform, man. That's a lot right there. I mean, that's almost like, you look at a lot of these bets where it's like 99% of the public is on one side and you're thinking, oh no, you know what's going to happen. They're going to lose. And like we saw with Brooklyn, Boston in game 3, and just looking at this, I don't even know what you can do. As you mentioned, there really is nothing to do. You're kind of stuck. You're shed out of luck, for lack of a better term here. But man, that's a lot of ownership on one guy to set out there and perform.
Yeah. So Tristan Thompson, I know that you're out there. We need a big game for you tonight because we're all riding on you, buddy.
Everybody.
Look, I don't know whether he's a DFS player or not, but yeah, there is going to be extreme pressure on him. And he's just going to have to play a good basketball game to keep his team alive at all anyway here, which pretty much everybody who is going to be on the court for Boston has to do against this Brooklyn team tonight anyway. So, yeah, to not get their doors blown off, he's going to have to give us a lot tonight, both in terms of fantasy production and in terms of real-life basketball production. 75%, you're talking about, especially at a singular position, a spot that I'd normally at least be exploring to find other options, but they just don't exist tonight. So it's just kind of a no-brainer, plug and play, free square kind of a play tonight.
All right, let's look. Mr. Moneybags on the premium Slack, and again, $29.95 for Awesemo Plus, and it's just an easy pass right there to get everything at your disposal, right? Everything at your disposal, where you can use tools, everything, premium access as well across the board to what we have. NBA, okay, we'll drop it $16.95 for the Awesemo Plus NBA Weekly Package, $4.95 for the NBA Weekly Express Package. But really, for $29.95, you're going to get all the free and premium tools that you don't have to sit and wait once a week to get at access across the board. And just looking at this really quick and kind of getting into more of the bigger picture for tonight, because we can't spend 30 minutes as much as you and I probably could, but we won't for the stream's sake, at least, on Tristan Thompson. Mr. Moneybags on the premium Slack. Terry, do you prefer the Celtics or Clippers as your core on DK for GPP? And he lays out Tatum, Smart, Fournier on one side to PG, Kawhi, and Jackson.
So I tell you what, on DK, the first two lineups off the top in running this 500 lineup optimal crunch came up entirely Celtics and Clippers. So those are the right two teams to be on in terms of the favored teams. There's a lot of value on both teams, and you've got some stars left, of course, with Tatum, with Kawhi, and Paul George. So the first lineup off the top, the most optimal on DK, left $100 on the table and used 5 Celtics and 3 Clippers, and nobody else from the other two teams. The second lineup spent the full amount. It was right there in terms of the projected points. Similar configuration with one change, basically inserted Marcus Morris instead of Reggie Jackson. So it's just really interesting. There's so much value and so much, I don't want to say reliability necessarily, but at least some predictability to those spots and to those offenses that it's just kind of coming together pretty well between those two teams and with those two teams for constructions in general, putting other pieces from the other games and the other teams into it. So yeah, those are the right two teams. If I'm choosing one, boy, I'd probably come down on the Clippers side just because there's more good players in play, I think. When you're getting both stars, you're getting guys like Reggie Jackson, like Marcus Morris, some reliable veterans there. With the Celtics, yeah, you're getting Jason Tatum. He's got monster upside here. I like Marcus Smart, but I think, in terms of being able to get the 2 stars, I think I just prefer, if I had to choose between them, the Clippers side of that one, but it's pretty close.
Speaking of stars and just looking at cost on DraftKings, back to DK here just for a second, Terry, looking at the difference between cost, Luka and Harden, clearly the 10K plus guys. I don't know how much concern, if there's any. Of course, Luka's going to play in this game and then some, but how much do you anticipate getting to either of these guys? The ownership for Luka makes a little more sense at just over 32%. Harden is increasing at 25%, but just starting with those two guys at the top as far as cost is concerned. And then Durant, Tatum, we know, and you mentioned Tatum, he's right there at the top. I mean, DraftKings, we have projected at 57% right now. I imagine that's going to increase as we get closer to lock at 7:00 Eastern here. So outside of Tatum, just kind of looking at Luka, Harden, and Durant, who's just under that 10K mode.
Yeah, and that Tatum ownership number, quite honestly, we can't double it because it's 57%, but I'd really like to. And he was coming up like that in that DK crunch. I just think he's going to have to do everything for this team. If he scores 75 real points tonight, they still might not win. So he's just going to have to take the entire load on his shoulders. And, he's their only hope and prayer. So I'm going to be getting to a ton of Jason Tatum. But to answer your question, I would prefer, out of Luka and Harden, I would prefer Luka. But with all the value at the point guard spot on DK, the other guys are coming up. We're getting a decent amount of the Marcus Smarts of the world, the Peyton Pritchards, the Reggie Jacksons of the world coming up above Luka. I would probably try and press him up above some of that ownership, just to kind of crack out toward, maybe where the public is, or slightly below, slightly above, and get a good share of Luka. I just think he's going to have a lot more to do in terms of handling the basketball, in terms of scoring the basketball, than Harden necessarily will. Harden, playing with the other 2 stars on that team, over the course of the 3 games of the playoffs, he's at 26.6% usage, with KD out at 34.4. So there's a big usage discrepancy. KD's really been the lead dog in the first couple games here for those guys. And then Kyrie trailing the trio at 23.6% usage in the playoffs. So if I'm choosing between Harden and Luka, I just think there's plenty of compelling reasons to go to Luka. 40.8% usage percentage. I mean, he's closing in on doubling Harden's usage right now. So I think that's kind of the direction I would go. And the crunch seems to be favoring that, not getting a lot of Harden here.
Yeah, I think some of this, and I wonder how you look at it, man, with the game flow, right? I mean, you look at Dallas and the Clippers. Dallas bounces back. They get this victory. It's going to be, I think, a lot harder for Dallas to get to blowout mode and just comfortably walk past the Clippers. Meanwhile, Brooklyn, there's a much easier path for this team to just obliterate Boston. Tatum can definitely still get his, but the game flow itself can lead to Boston just being cooked, I would think, rather early. So I wonder how much that could, pardon me, Terry, would factor into James Harden and how much activity you think he can get in lineups, especially with that blowout factor kind of lingering.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another concern for sure is, I don't love to play the potential for blowout narrative in full slates during the course of the season. I want to get to who I'm supposed to get to. But in this kind of a situation with so little to choose from, we kind of do have to zero in on points like that. And yeah, if you're talking about Nets who might be coming off the floor at just around 30 minutes, yielding some minutes to guys like Claxton because they're ahead by 20, 25 points in the fourth quarter here, then yeah, you do want to kind of focus in on the more reliable minutes for the good players, the key stars. And you're going to see that in the game that's projected by Vegas to be a lot closer. Just it's got all the narrative behind it for being a closer, more competitive game. Celtics playing without most of their good players, or a bunch of their good players anyway. There should just be no real challenge here for Brooklyn. And I think they're going to get out ahead early and kind of coast on this one. I know you've got, what is it, over under 100 points in the first quarter or something like that for Brooklyn today?
Yeah, I'll find that for you specifically.
Well, I know you were hammering that spot, so I figured you'd have it just like offhand.
No, not the total. I was just I was pounding them all over the place earlier when we had that up with Eric. But now looking at the first quarter total, that actually might make the most sense, to be honest with you, because you know that they're going to come out, as you mentioned, the guns blazing, right? For lack of a better term here. So that, it's up to 9 where I am here, by the way, in PA, just as a quick little aside. But yeah, I think a lot of damage is going to be done. So that first quarter total is going to be pretty high, but at the same time, 54 to 58.5, you're only going to get a positive return on over 60.5. Would you jump in on that?
Yeah, it might be that might be pressing it.
Brooklyn's going to have to do all of the heavy lifting.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I don't know if Boston's going to be able to keep pace enough. That's up there.
No, I don't necessarily know. You're going to get all, depending on where you are, of the best odds presented for you already with all the work done at oddshopper.awesemo.com. We have a couple of player props that we saw that we'll throw out as well as we get closer to telling you all about No House Advantage. You want to make sure you hit a like, you share, you subscribe to what we're doing here on Awesemo, and also hit that notification bell. Again, for these shows, the Live Before Locks, we have 2 games. It's a juicy slate. You don't want to miss any insight from Terry on any of these positions, especially with this Brooklyn-Boston game that's going to be a nail-biter. You watch. Double overtime. Brooklyn-Boston, 162 to 160.
Oh, I like it.
No.
Bold call. No. That's what you're here for, everybody.
No. I can't put my name behind that by any means. You did mention Jaws, and there's no other movie that's going to top the best Memorial Day movie when it comes to that in a theme. But I do wonder, it is Memorial Day, and normally the country is heading somewhere to a vacation spot. You and I are pretty much trapped in the house with all the cold, wet weather here. But what about beach? Best movie with a beach in it. Jaws, take Jaws out, all right? Jaws may be an obvious one for some, you and I think, but let's take Jaws and Jaws 2 for that matter. I don't want you sneaking in here on a technicality and hitting me with Jaws 2. All Jaws are out, but the best movie with a beach in it.
At least Jaws 2 had Shander in it. I'll say that much about it. It's certainly not 3 or 4, which I also won't bring into the equation here.
Thank you.
Let's see. I'll throw in it came to mind when I mentioned summer movies before. It's definitely got a beach in it multiple times. A blast of a summer movie. Great fun from Savage Steve Holland, the movie One Crazy Summer with John Cusack from the way back in the day. Gold Plate. Hoops McCann. That's right.
Look at that.
I mean, Moore's in that flick. A lot of good 80s people in that movie. Hilarious flick. Same guy who directed Better Off Dead. Savage Steve Holland put that one together. His only 2 movies.
Teddy's got to do his laps. What a throwback movie that is. Wow. I'll hit you with an obvious one because I always like forcing you to dig a little deeper, as we will right now, looking at beyond Luka and Harden at the 1 spot. Before that, though, let me just take another obvious one off the board here for you. Point Break. I mean, the original Point Break. I don't do remakes here, but the original Point Break, because it was such the juxtaposition of everything going on is, they happen to be really good surfers and out there surfing all the time. So Brody,
kill it.
Go full Broads on you. All right,
great let's fun go. Action flick. That was like our first sports action movie too. It was cool.
Yes, absolutely. You had a little bit of both all around there. So beyond what we had with Luka and Harden, kind of looking at the higher price guys, I did see him mentioned on the stream. He did come up earlier in the day as well as we were getting ready for the lock on the 4-game slate. But it looks like he's appropriately priced. I just don't know how much you would look at using him in your lineups, how much exposure you're going to get to Kyrie Irving, Terry.
Yeah, so I like the price, particularly on FanDuel, 8,400, 85 against the lower cap on DK is also fine. We've got definitely a path for him to be productive at that. We're just getting so much value at the point guard spot between these other guys, the Celtics in particular, that popped up that, I don't know how much you need to get to him on DK. I'm just pulling it up over here. Across that 500 lineup crunch, he came up in 2%. He came up 8 times in that 500 lineup crunch on DK. Now, flipping over to FanDuel, he comes up 54% of the time because we're getting our values from other spots on FanDuel, really, with that, Tristan Thompson costing like nothing and occupying all of the center shares, getting a lot of Joe Harris at the small forward, taking up less salary than if you're going to some of the star caliber players there, because you get Paul George at shooting guard over here. So there's just different ways that it comes together. So we're getting a lot of Luka and a lot of Kyrie on the FanDuel slate. And I think that makes sense, just given the way that he's priced over there. Like I mentioned, he is the trailing member of that Nets trio in terms of usage during the playoffs at 23%, but he's going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to have to do a decent amount on the floor for this team during the course of the game. Only sitting at a 16.4% assist share and a 17.6% rebounding rate so far for the playoffs as well. So he just hasn't been incredibly productive, but we know what Kyrie Irving can do on the basketball court any given day. So I think there's definitely a path for him to be a productive part of this. And he's coming up way more in the optimal on FanDuel.
I want to bring you back to what you said. Larry C on the premium Slack brought this up, and I think it's interesting just to kind of get your point of view on this, because we're dealing with clearly the 2-game slate. So I don't know how much, I imagine it does when you add more games to an 8 to a 10 to a 12-game slate. But Larry C asks, Terry, you just said optimal had 5 Celtics. That being said, would you set a max per team? Usually does 3 on FC.
Not for a 2-game slate, I would.
Right.
On a 2-game slate, I'll take whatever I get. 3-game slate as well. I'll take as whatever configuration I can, and that's the kind of situation where in other sports, if you consider it, when you get down to a slate that small, you start considering hitters against your pitcher, you start considering quarterback against the defense, things like you need to get a little bit funky with these slates because there's just not much to choose from. And if you go with the most obvious plays, the most obvious configurations, you're just going to be duped 100 times. So if you win, you're not going to be winning very much. You're carving up your prize pool there. So to do it optimally, yeah, I think you leave it wide open today and just kind of take what you get. And I would be fine with 5 Celtics in this one. I think there's a clear path for all of those guys to deliver value on their salaries.
8,600 for Paul George on DK. Clearly going to be a little bit more on FanDuel because of that one spot locked in where you get to play 2 shooting guards. But, knowing that you would lock him in, I would think on both sites. I don't know how much you're anchoring lineups with George, but I imagine that just looking at the other options as things get a little tighter here, especially with Walker, and maybe there's some more reliance upon Smart or Fournier, and you can counter that with just knowing what you're going to get in return from Paul George. But when you look at George and Leonard, we should throw both of them in there. How many lineups do you anticipate having, again, with both versus one of 2?
I think there's going to be on DK a good amount of lineups that would have both in terms of the way these are coming together in that crunch for the optimal. Now, that is a spot where you can make an easy decision, make it an easy inflection point for the way that you create your lineups and the way that you're putting your entries in, depending on how you divide things up and how your shares are distributed. You could decide, I don't want to necessarily play these guys together. That said, I think they're priced appropriately to be played together. I think there's a limited amount of choice. So you're just going to run into the wall of opportunity cost if you start dividing them up deliberately and do something like making a rule that says they can't be rostered together. If you wanted to limit to, all right, I'm going to cap it at 35-40% of my total lineups that go in that would have these guys together, and maybe claw back some shares from the public that would still have them together. I think that would be more viable than creating a global rule. But I think the most optimal approach is probably going to be to be open to including them together at the very least. Between the two, I would probably slightly prefer Kawhi, just doing a little bit more in terms of the scoring average, doing a little bit more in terms of the overall minutes. It's by like a minute, so it's not really a major difference. And it's very close in terms of usage. He's getting like a 1% more or 1.7% more usage. So just a little bit more there for Kawhi. If we're deciding between the two, but I would have tremendous amount of both on the DK slate. And then on FanDuel, it comes up fairly similarly, but Paul George would be the preference over there. Getting to more of him, he's the second highest on shooting guard over there, where Kawhi comes up third at the small forward.
Deep cut question here for you on the premium Slack, but I must say I'm pretty proud. Also, a super chat we're going to get to Philly Mamba in 1 second, but I will say I'm pretty proud of the chat. All of the suggestions that I saw thrown out of famous or best movie with a beach in it. Not one suggestion for Castaway, and I'm happy to see that.
Wow.
Yes,
that's a surprise, since the 3/4 of the movie is just entirely beach. That's one that's on all the time too. I mean, you'd think that would be at the fore. I think it was on yesterday. I was watching a few minutes of it.
Yeah, I don't think people are. I don't think people walk away with a memorable experience. Maybe he's yelling at a volleyball for 2.5 hours. Terry, come on.
Not the most eventful movie. That is true. It's somewhat rewatchable in terms of like if it's on, you can get through a few minutes of it, because there's like scenes that just, well, I guess I was gonna say there's like peak scenes, but there's really not, other than like getting on the raft and losing the volleyball. Outside of that, it just kind of moves. So
hey, It doesn't have Demi Moore in it like One Crazy Summer. So checkmate. Right. That's all I got to say. Philly Mamba. All right, this is a big one here for you. FanDuel Cash, Terry. Luca on the super chat. Again, $29.95. Awesemo Plus. Get in the premium Slack. The super chat here for Philly Mamba. Luca, Porzingis, Pritchard, Fournier, or Kyrie, Jackson, Kawhi, Morris tonight. People really stretching out the line. At some point, we're going to get a super chat, which basically says, here's my lineup. What do you think of it?
Yeah, why don't we just share the screen and we'll build a lineup that everybody can go enter, and that'll just be the show. I actually pulled up YouTube so I could look at that and think about it at the same time. I think, boy, that's really splitting the baby. I think that I would prefer the Luka side of that barely. It's really close because I don't love the Porzingis and Pritchard part, but I am fine with the Fournier part. And I would be lower down on playing all three of Jackson, Kawhi, and Morris together, and think there's a maybe lower place for Jackson and Morris. So I think I'd be on the first one, but it's close.
When you have these bigger questions, and this is a juicy one here with what, 4 that we have on the slate to choose from on either side, do you ever start from the bottom and say, all right, let's look at the worst guys and see if there's any significant difference there, and use that as the mitigating factor?
Sure, absolutely. Because a lot of times you're getting, all right, the stars are going to play 36 minutes. They're going to be at 1.2 fantasy points per minute versus 1.18. Those aren't these guys' actual numbers. I'm just making this up.
Right.
But you can, your stars are going to come out at like an even level. And a lot of times, especially when the questions come up that way, people will be on the wrong scrubs or the guys who are slightly less valuable. So that's actually a good way to look at it, because you can often pick off the first mistake in which value guys they're getting to. So yeah, definitely a good way to look at it, and a good way to consider this, because a lot of the times the stars kind of shake out evenly.
Boy, I was just looking at this here. I was trying to flip over the tab to No House Advantage and saw the final tally there. Chris Paul 1 assist shy of a double-double. He was plus 650. Right around when the gate closed for a double-double. And if you took that, you have to be thinking to yourself, one more bucket. You kidding me? You couldn't get one more bucket from Devin Booker at least, or Eytan down low? Man, that's got to sting.
That's brutal. I want to see how many potentially assists he left on the shelf too when that comes out later on.
I'm sure there's going to be like 4, and 2 of them are probably going to be like shots that rim out, right? Or something ridiculous. Sure. It's the nature of it. No House Advantage, however, is where we go for all types of predictions and projections, as I try to mix the two together there. But really, this is the spot for everything that you need when it comes to player props. It's what we use alongside live betting. It's what we use alongside anything player that you want ahead of time to get just information about. And it's everything. Player props from the NBA, MLB, football, golf, cash prizes, over 500 player props that you have offered on the site. First $20 matched with Awesemo. That's our promo code. So download the app and use it if you're not already, especially because it's such a significant advantage for you to be betting on No House Advantage for player props, because lines don't move. You don't have to worry about books reacting to heavy money on one side. You don't have to worry about losing value. It's all there. And then if you don't believe me, just check the projections. Check the projections and the line at No House Advantage and how easy it is to slide under or over depending on the search tab. And from there, check the book, because I guarantee you the book is going to be like a half to maybe a point difference. And then No House Advantage, you're going to get 3, maybe 3.5 points. It's much easier to bet that way because it's all about winning.
That's right.
Absolutely. Summer Rental. Your thoughts?
Nice. Good one. Another John Candy, absolute classic. When they got the regatta at the end. How many of these summer movies end with like a boat race at the end? One Crazy Summer had a sailboat race at the end. That one had a sailboat race at the end, right?
Yes.
Candy was good for summer movies too. He also had The Great Outdoors, another like summer family vacation movie. Went in a different direction on a lake, but he was solid for those summer flicks.
Yeah, Summer Rental was such an underrated movie because he wasn't like the real catalyst and like moving the story. Everything was just happening to him. Right. It was just great to see him react to everything.
Yeah, they show up in the beach houses rented to another family. Yeah, absolutely. They got Rip Torn there. Scully's catch of the day.
That's right. Yeah, Rip Torn. I forgot that was him in the bar. All right, Sold Dope 1234. We've got more. Trust me. Terry's not getting out of here without diving into Weekend at Bernie's, I promise. Sold Dope 1234, top stars you prefer to pay up for on FanDuel. Top stars outside of Tristan Thompson, that is, on FanDuel, Terry.
Yeah, I mean, Thompson's our go-to lock at the center position, but I think Jason Tatum's kind of a no-brainer there. And then we were getting to plenty of the star point guards. We were getting to a big share of Luka, so I would go that route. I would go to Kyrie. It's kind of just a name the stars in these two games kind of a question, but I think that's really, it's Tatum at the power forward, and then you can get to some scrub / mid-range type guys at small forward with Fournier and Harris slotting in there. And then you have Marcus Smart to use at shooting guard. So Paul George pops into that role, but you can spread shooting guard a little bit where it's more focused on stars with Luka and Kyrie at the point. So I'd be between power forward Jason Tatum and the 2 point guards for FanDuel stars.
Yeah, Fournier getting a lot of love ownership-wise on DK and just looking smart, not too far behind him. I do wonder if there is any type of strategy involved in looking a little deeper in that lineup, anticipating, and Pritchard has been mentioned for sure, especially at that price at 3,100. But again, I can't shake the fact that this is going to be a convincing win for Brooklyn and almost anticipating that and taking advantage of spending elsewhere and locking up as many superstars as you can, and then balancing that out with lower end guys, to say the least, on Boston.
Yeah. And look, there's going to be a path to that. He's going to get minutes regardless. And it could go a couple different ways. He could stumble into 25 to 28 minutes here fairly easily. We've got him projected at 20.4, which is at least enough to keep him on the board on the DK slate at 3,100. He's got like a 12% boom score probability. It's not what we're gunning for necessarily, but on a slate like this, where we've got such limited choices, you can do a lot with that cost savings. You can do a lot with that 3,100. And then he doesn't need to go very much beyond the 17 DK points that we've got him projected for to pay that off pretty nicely for you. So I definitely think there's value there. And then we talked about it already, just kind of the security, the safety of going to some of the mid-range guys from that other game where you're getting to some reliable players, some more established players who have, they cost a little bit more, but they're in a game that's probably going to be closer, probably going to be more competitive, played through the fourth quarter, where there's a very strong chance that, like you said, Brooklyn just goes out and lights these Celtics up tonight. So I think that's a sound approach, is maybe grab some of the extreme values from this game and then play the more reliable, more established mid-range types from the other game.
Is there a path to just lie heavy on the side of star chalk as much as you can, load up on that Clippers Dallas game, and then avoid, I know it's going to be difficult in most cases, but maybe you leave one of those slots open for Tatum and he's another chalk play that you're comfortable with, but instead of one of the big three, or instead of somebody other than Tatum that may jump out like a Durant, to apply that same line of thinking with Brooklyn, because you know that it's not like the big three are going to be out there if they're up by 35 points. So I wonder if, as we mentioned, that path to Boston, knowing that there are going to be back end guys, 3K a little bit above on Boston to look at in that anticipation of it. Why not on the flip side with Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And that's keeping a guy like, like a Landry Shamet somewhat interested.
Yeah.
He's another $3,100 guy. We've only got him projected for 14 DK points, but at that cost, if he scores 3 more DK points, 4 more DK points, you're in business there. So there's nothing to really hate there. And he's projected for a similar amount of minutes. We've got him at 21.8. We were just talking about Pritchard, who's projected for 20.4. Pritchard's getting more attention just for the, narrative around his team. With Kemba being out, people expecting more. People probably got more from Pritchard in a few spots through the course of the season than they did Landry Shamet. But Shamet's just as capable of coming out there and putting up a relevant score in this kind of a slate. He's absolutely on the board. And I think, yeah, it makes sense. It's the same story that we're telling with going to that side. We're just doing it with even lower owned guys at cost. So I think Nick Claxton is interesting in that space. I think Blake has some utility there. He's more expensive than the other guys, so he's going to have to do a little bit more for us. And I think there's probably less of a path there. But he's got 22 minutes projected for him. If he sees like 26, I could see Blake getting to a relevant score for only 4,200 on DK. Another guy that you can move around into the center spot and maybe offset some of that Tristan Thompson ownership, which is pretty extreme on the DK slate as well. So I don't hate that. Like we're somewhat hunting for minutes with those value type guys and those mid-range type guys. Bruce Brown comes to mind as well. 22 minutes projected. Has some upside, has some scoring potential, 0.93 fantasy points per minute across the course of the season. Would need to get that run to become relevant, but it's possible. And particularly if they take all 3 stars off the court in the fourth quarter.
Could you look at getting to anybody other than the big three on Brooklyn in a captain mode, as far as maybe it's a Joe Harris or maybe, I don't know if it would be anybody else. Blake Griffin, probably not. But could you see, as far as in a showdown, rolling with a captain, anybody other than the big three with Brooklyn?
If you're offsetting enough in terms of your ownership, the exposure that the public's going to be at, I guess Joe Harris would be your man in that question, but I don't really like it. It's not a spot I'm looking to get to. 15.5% usage guy. Like, I just want a guy with heavier usage. You're basically relying on the idea that Joe Harris is going to go out there and knock down like 7 threes for you tonight and still have to do more than that. He's taking 7.7 per game in the playoffs. He's making 3.7 on a 47.8. That's killer shooting, 3-point shooting percentage. But he's going to need to go out there and probably take 12 threes for you tonight to pay that off and make more than half of them. I don't know that I like it. It's asking quite a bit of Joe Harris.
Maybe everybody's tired, man. Like, just go out, Joe. I mean, maybe they're just going to feed him the pill tonight, man. Just say, hey, you go out there, Joe Harris. You knock down 6 threes in the first quarter. We could get the hell out of here with a victory. James Harden doesn't even need to break a sweat. Can we get to that narrative? Probably not.
Let's just give James the night off entirely. Let's just rely on Joe Harris. Why not? They own this series already anyway. Why not? Have a little fun with it.
Absolutely. I think you could definitely work with that. Have you ever, I have to admit, we talk about best movies with the beach in it. I have not seen, of all things, the movie with the name and the title, The Beach, with Leo. Have you seen that?
That was going to be my next up, actually. I have seen that. Yeah, Danny Boyle flick. Good movie. It's
It's worth a watch?
It is. I enjoy it. It's this trippy kind of a movie where he's off in foreign land and gets swept up in this adventure going to the secluded island paradise, and this, that, the other thing happened. But yeah, there's some cool visual scenes in it and cool story. I always like the idea of being the solo traveler and all of that stuff, and did a bit of that through my life, mostly traveling for business and everything. And one of my adventures brought me to China, and I was in one of those wet markets that we all know so much about these days. Wow. But at the time, it wasn't a big deal. And in that movie, The Beach, there's a scene where DiCaprio, he's in Thailand, I think. He drinks some snake blood in like 3 o'clock in the morning, drunk back alley kind of a scene with a bunch of hardcore crazy guys around. So I decided that was something that normal people do, and I would have to do that while I was in this wet market. So I did. Snake blood is really, really salty. And pretty gross, and they're going to give you a glass of what they call white wine, and that's actually the worst grain alcohol you've ever had in your entire life. So if you do it, be careful.
Wow. That is definitely not something I thought we would get to with this here. So I'm thinking
my story about the beach.
You're shooting snake blood and you're chasing it with
Drinking.
grain alcohol.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean like shooting it as a shot,
it was a
right?
shot, but I wanted to be very clear that we were not injecting snake
Oh,
blood.
no. Yes, I apologize. Yes. Can you count any of those Pirates of the Caribbean movies as beach movies? Probably not, right? They're more boat movies. We'll save that for a different show.
Yeah. Tentpole kind of blockbustery kind of movies. I think we could take those out.
Okay, fair enough. I was just making sure. I also saw the Blue Lagoon heavily mentioned here, so I don't want to skip over another older. I'm always tempted to stay away from the older movies because it continues to date you and I as just older members of the Awesemo community. So, but I did see Blue Lagoon mentioned a couple of times over, so we're not the only old ones here.
And people love to throw out movies that you couldn't make today in conversation. And I happen to think you can make most movies as long as you do it the right way. Movies with a 16-year-old Brooke Shields running around naked on a beach probably couldn't make that today.
No, probably not. Wow. I definitely no. See, I didn't see that. I didn't see The Beach. So a couple of movies now added to it. I don't know, man. I think, outside of stuff like Weekend at Bernie's, I think we might have pretty much scraped it, right? Did we leave an obvious one off here?
Nothing that's immediately leaping to mind. I'm sure with a couple quick Googles, people probably have a bunch of different top 20s and things that we're not thinking of. There's, if you wanted to go a little extreme, you could say like several of the Lethal Weapon movies. Riggs lived in that little shack on the beach or like a trailer on the beach. So kind of, there's a couple scenes there with him and the dog and the South African chick that he brings home and everything. So you can throw Lethal Weapon in there if you want to get a little creative. And I left it out of the birthday conversation. There is that great scene at the beginning. It kind of kicks off with a birthday scene. And I had forgotten that. I was thinking of the retirement cake scene from 3.
Right.
Yeah, one kicks off with a birthday scene.
If you're going to open up the door that Lethal Weapon is a beach movie, then you have to add Summer School with Mark Harmon because he also lived on the beach. All right. Boom.
That's the other solid summer movie, beach movie combo. Chainsaw and Dave.
Yes.
Oh my God. I love
it. Are you getting a Rondo tonight? Is playoff Rondo making an appearance in your lineups, Terry? Are you going to rely on Rajon tonight at 4,800 on DK?
Yeah, I think we can get to some playoff Rondo. Yeah. Why not? I think he's good. Yeah, there's definitely a path for him to see some fourth quarter run in a close game. That's kind of what he's there for. So he's not like popping off the board, but I think at that price at a 24-minute projection, there's definitely a path for him to be relevant. And it's not like he's getting completely hammered with ownership. Only as of my last update, 16% ownership projection, it looks like on DK. Not too bad. And he's one of those guys that's like the mid-range type salary guy. He's not an extreme value on this slate, but he is one of those guys from that spot that we were talking about where it's more reliable minutes, probably a tighter game, supposed to be more competitive. We can kind of slot him in and think about some playoff Rondo there. Certainly would rather roster playoff Rondo than playoff Julius Randle at this point. I'll tell you that much.
I didn't bring them up because we're looking at lock tonight. I also noticed that you don't have any Knicks memorabilia, not only on, but also in your studio. Like I can't even see anything behind you. I see Star Wars. I see the Yankees. I see what looks to be a Giants helmet winning the Super Bowl 35. Is that right? Like I can't see anything at all. Did you strip everything from the studio down? Is it all burned? Where's that Melo jersey?
I told you when I wear the jerseys, they usually lose. And apparently I just jinxed the entire series by doing that, coming out wearing a Melo jersey day one. So I will go a little New York. I do have Spidey on my shirt here. So that's a little New York. We need a superhero right now to rescue the New York Knicks so they can face your Sixers in the next round. So going with Spidey, we'll get into that conversation maybe some other time, but maybe New York's greatest superhero, Spider-Man. I think so.
I would think so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been redone. Anything that's been redone 63 different times, I think he classifies already as the number one for sure. All right, real quick, as far as Dallas is concerned, we talked a lot about Luka, and I see some people popping it on the stream now, fading Luka heavy for whatever reason. Go ahead and do that if you dare. But also, as far as Porzingis being just a great option across the board, especially DraftKings where you can maneuver him into that center spot. 7,300, pretty cheap across the board when you look at the slate above him. So I would think that Porzingis is going to be a guy you're going to get to a lot tonight.
Yeah, I think I would. I'll pull up the crunches again and see how much he was coming up. I expect we're going to have a decent amount of them, just given the pricing, given who he is. And he's priced down a little bit, particularly on FanDuel today, for the lack of performance so far in the playoffs. But I think there's definitely, we know he's an established guy. We know the upside that comes with Kristaps Porzingis on most nights when he's going right. So yeah, I think we can get there for 6,900 on the FanDuel slate at power forward. 73, another guy that you can move into some center shares on DK, which helps getting away from some of that heavy Tristan Thompson ownership. And I like the idea of using KP in that spot and then getting to another one of the high end power forwards and then spreading some of the other shares around to the guard and the small forward positions. So I think he's got a lot of utility on the DK slate and maybe going a little bit underappreciated by the public. Maybe that ownership number should be up a little bit higher. So I would be getting to a fair amount of them in the crunch. It looks like he came up a little bit less than I expected on the DK side of things. He's only about 11% over there, moving between positions, which I'm kind of surprised by. We're getting a little bit of Dorian Finney-Smith in there, which I think I would probably figure out a way to pay for Porzingis instead of DFS in that spot. Maybe move him over to the center, like I said, and they get to a different power forward. So it's just interesting how that comes together on the DK slate. And then on FanDuel coming up, nearly 50% of the time. Like I said, we were getting to most of our shares in the first spot with Jason Tatum at power forward. And then Marcus Morris is mixing in, which I think makes sense. Value price Marcus Morris going to see a lot of minutes in that game, 4,100. So we're getting to basically an even distribution between those two, and then random little shares of Maxi Kleber and Nick Claxton.
All right, so looking at that, especially from a minute standpoint, and I did see on the stream, we did leave out one Harrison Ford and Hesh movie that needs to be referenced before we get out of here. Tim Hardaway Jr., you're talking about minutes. He's going to get it. Clearly in these 3 games, we've seen him over 30 minutes. The more minutes, the deeper into this series. Expecting a closer game. He's going to be out there, 5,500 on DraftKings. So somewhere in the middle between Porzingis and Dorian Finney-Smith as far as what you're paying, how much does he pop up in your optimizer?
Yeah, Timmy's a player that I wasn't getting to a ton through the regular season. I try and avoid scoring dependent guys a lot of the time. But I think on this slate, in this case, a guy in the close game, or the game we expect to be close anyway, a guy who you can move between forward and guard on DK, that's 5 positions basically on DK, gives you a lot of flexibility, and there's a lot that we can do. We know he can come out and hit a few threes and really light it up. So I expect a decent game at worst out of Timmy today. They kind of need him to fill that role off the bench for them and occupying some of those minutes. He's averaging 20 points per game, 20 real points per game so far in the playoffs. So yeah, make a few of those shots. I can definitely get to some Timmy shares, and not getting egregiously owned on the DK slate. Is a little bit under 40 over there, which I think is fine. I'd be comfortable rostering him with that because of how flexible he is, because of the ability to move him to so many spots. It kind of offsets a little bit of heavy ownership because you can still use him in unique constructions and you can still put things together in different ways. So I don't really care about the ownership quite as much as I would if he was just restricted to one spot.
How did you forget 6 days, 7 nights?
It's, you know what? It's been on cable a ton over this last year or so. So I feel like I've seen it probably 5 or 6 times in the last 6 months. I bet out of everybody on the stream, I've seen it more recently than everybody
else. But that's got to be brought up as, and again, we're stretching it, not the best, but one of the more memorable movies with a beach in it, right?
Yeah, it was a fun adventure flick. I got nothing against that one. I'm a big Harrison Ford fan, so it was nice to see him, later in his career, still continuing the action adventure movies. I don't know how we're going to do with 80-something-year-old Harrison Ford in the next Indiana Jones movie that they're apparently still making.
Don't watch it.
That's going to be a little rough. The last one was a little bit rough.
If you don't watch it, you're not. Okay, great.
It's a parody, another 80s movie. It was a parody of the 1950s beach movies, and I'm thinking of Frankie and Annette in Back to the Beach.
Oh, man.
Remember that one? With the humunga cowabunga from down under?
Absolutely. The Big Kahuna, right?
Yeah. Frank Avalon and Annette Funicello, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yes.
30 years before I was born.
Yeah, see, when I'm a kid, I watched that movie. I had no idea what they were parodying. So I'm just thinking this is, all right, everything going on there. But yeah, and I'm thinking this is a little bizarre. It's one thing if you're watching Scary Movie and whatever, they're parodying everything that you know. In this case, I'm young. I'm seeing Back to the Beach and I'm being told, oh, no, these are all older movies about. I'm thinking, wow, all right, well, that makes more sense. But that's nice shout there.
There we go. had to come up with something good for the end of the stream. I
net
didn't see that one
jello.
pop up anywhere, so I had to come up with one.
No, nobody was going back to the beach. I saw people trying to sneak in the Goonies as a beach movie because it ends on a beach. Get out of here.
That's
You can't,
that's
no
not the kind of beach
technicalities.
we were talking about here. I also
No.
saw somebody throw in somebody threw in Platoon, and then somebody threw in
But
geez,
Apocalypse Now?
Apocalypse Now. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
You did have
that's
a memorable
famous
beach
scene on a
movie.
beach.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Safe
I
to surf
think we
that
fall
beach
short.
there, Robert Duvall, but it's not really a beach movie.
Yeah, even though they do go surfing and they talk surfing, I mean, that's the closest one we're getting. But I still like to think of people, maybe having a little bit more fun than being bombed on a beach in my beach movies.
Swanson 79 on the premium Slack. Odd Shopper, we did have this. We were looking at this on the sheet ahead of time. Has Harden under 26.5 points at an 84% X win rate. Would you take that? I'm inclined to go under 26.5 again, just knowing that it's not going to be one guy here out dominating. And even if Brooklyn is up big, especially if Brooklyn is up big, it's not going to be because James Harden carried the team for the first 2 quarters and has 30 points at the half. So I think just through game flow alone, this would be a good play to go under, Terry.
Yeah, I agree with that one. And just taking a peek at our No House Advantage board here, it looks like the boss's projections agree with that as well. Alex has him projected for only around 20 real points, coming up with around a 69% probability of going under on that one. So yeah, I would be there as well.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if there was anything other with that, but no, the value is right there. And again, the return on it from No House Advantage, Odd Shopper. I mean, you've combined both, and you're pretty much being told to go ahead and hit that under. And again, just looking around here and knowing that we were talking a little bit about Dallas and trying to find anything a little deeper in there, lower on the totem pole, if you will, for value. Just looking at Morris, kind of on that flip side for where we were looking at Finney Smith, and to a lesser extent, the price a little higher for Hardaway Jr. But looking at someone like Morris, and maybe we mentioned Reggie Jackson in a group, but now individually, are you getting to these guys a little lower than the George and Leonards on your lineups?
Yeah, well, getting to a decent amount of both Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris in lineups, it looks like they're coming up a little bit less than the Kawhis and the Paul Georges of the world in terms of the DK slate, but they're not that far down. I mean, we're talking about looking at the shooting guard spot, Paul George around 52% in this crunch, and Reggie coming up 44. So very comparable marks there. And then at the forward spot, getting to Kawhi like 60% of the time, and Marcus about 37%. So that's probably a little bit more aggressive than we would necessarily think of when we just hear those names, Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris. But on this slate, they're key players, and they're going to be an integral part of successful lineups here. So I think a lot of the probable constructions, a lot of the optimals are going to be headed in that direction, or a lot of the lineups most likely to be the optimal is the right way to say that. We can only have one optimal lineup. So yeah, I think both of those guys should be owned and would be owned in a fair share of my lineups here. I would be very heavy on Celtics and Clippers.
Bino Amadeo on the premium Slack here, Terry. FD, GPP, Luka, Harris, Batum, or Jackson, PG, and Harris?
Luka, Harris, Batum, or Jackson, PG, and Harris?
Correct.
I think it would be, yeah, Jackson, PG, and Harris for sure. I think Batum, you're taking too big of a chunk out with Batum to get yourself to Luka, I think there.
Fair enough.
It's not Batum's completely out of play, but I don't think your differential is going to be enough to necessarily justify it there.
I got to give Eric props, man. He earlier in the day warned everybody to have a Kemba plan with Walker being out and not pivoting right away and panicking with Walker in. So I think we pretty much covered that extensively as far as how to look at Boston, as these lineups are going to lock in 2 minutes. How to look at Boston, how to approach Boston, and really on the flip side, the mentality of going into it with Brooklyn. I think the later game, if you will, is going to be a little tougher, but benefit us, I think, right? Tougher as far as a tighter game, but benefit us as far as playing guys that we know we can trust. The star power in the first game seems like, outside of Jason Tatum, just so difficult to trust.
Yeah, and that's it. It's just that matter. Yeah, those guys, it's the siren song of those stars sitting there, but they're just not going to have to do a lot, especially the trio on the Nets, Tatum is going to have to do a lot for his team to even be competitive, let alone win this game. So if I'm going to anybody from that game, gun to my head, got to pick one guy. It's going to be Tatum. Salary taken off the board and everything. I think there's a path for one of these nets to go off, but I don't even know that it's most likely going to be KD given the usage. But I don't even know that even if he's got a nice game going, does he have that rocket fuel to get to that extreme nice game where it's absolutely mandatory. There's no other way to get to the top of standings without it. I don't know. I don't think he's going to have that upside. I just don't think he's going to need to get there. So it would be all about Tatum and probably some more of those Celtics before most of these Nets. And I'm thinking of Marcus Smart, Evan Fournier, Tristan Thompson, obviously on the FanDuel slate where you're just kind of locking him in and rolling with it because there are no other centers. So it would be more about the Celtics side, just the team that's a little bit more desperate, going to be a little bit more concentrated in who's getting the minutes, who's on the court, just a matter of healthy bodies and healthy NBA capable bodies.
All right, true or false? There's a rumor going out there that instead of you sitting down and watching your lineups win you money in this Brooklyn-Boston game, you're going to set it, forget it, and watch Side Out as one of the best movies with a beach ever in the history of beach movies. Come on, Thomas Howell, Peter
Horton.
That's a
solid call. I haven't seen that movie in a long, long time. That's one I might not even be able to pull a quote from. I haven't seen it in that long. I do know the movie, though. That's dynamite. Well done.
All right, everybody. We appreciate you. We appreciate Jordan suffering through another talk of movies and going down rabbit holes. But really, we appreciate everybody out there. Like, share, subscribe. And again, make sure you hit this notification bell that you see so you're not missing stuff, especially you're not popping in late and yelling, point break, point break. No, we got that out of the way right away. It was like Terry's take on the big three. We got that out of the way right away. You don't want to miss anything. Just tell the world what we're doing here. $29.95 Awesemo Plus. Another fantastic show, my friend. Appreciate you as always, Terry.
Yep. A lot of fun, bud. This was great.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I thought you were throwing it to me for a promo there. You said tell them about. All right, so let's tell them about it. $29.95 gets you what? It gets you access to Awesemo Plus, gets you behind the paywall, gets you into Slack. You're talking to guys like me. You're talking to guys like Eytan all day long. Talking to guys like Josh for basketball stuff. Spags, who won all that money the other day. Yeah. Get right in there. Get direct with your Q&A. Talk to us. Ask us questions. Throw your results to the Awesemo Hall of Fame. We love seeing that. And then if you're behind the paywall, you're getting all the projections, all the tools and content that we talk about, the boom bust, the top stacks, top starters for baseball. We've got content galore for every single sport. Get in there, stop guessing, start winning.
I love it, man. See Thomas Howell, Side Out, we're out.